We asked storytellers to select a type of story and some words to inspire the stories that they tell.
So Madison reminds me of advertising, and I used to work for an advertising firm called Ogilvy and Mather, and that was that was my first job where I was laid off. That was the first time being downsized. You don't call it laid off, you call it downsized. I work in IT, so a lot of times they'll hire a lot of technologists because like the latest and greatest in technology, companies want to like push that out. And then it'll be mismanaged. And then technologists are expensive, and then they'll just start downsizing and laying everybody off. And so like that type of cycle, you kind of get used to, but you never think it's gonna happen to you. And where I worked, there was like a hierarchy. The sales were number one, and they would have, and we would be the producers, so we would produce what they promised to the client. And a lot of times they would have like beer and pizza every Friday, but they would say, not for you guys, this is for the sales and the account execs. And you just have to sit there and take it. It would just be sitting there in the common area, but not for the technologists who are doing all the work. So when I got my package, I also had, I'm jumping ahead a little bit because when I got my package, I always thought like, this is completely unfair, but there's nothing you can do. You know, there's no debating when you don't get a package either. You just get laid off. You get your 2 weeks notice and you're out. But it's also filled with a lot of ego, and when you're the only woman on the team, you kind of get a little paranoid. But at the same time, you're just like, okay, I'll just take my package and sign on the dotted line and leave. So as you keep going to this cycle and you see that some people, it's not by seniority, it's not by skill level, it's just about the people who've networked better tend to stay a little bit longer. And they can ride the wave until the next cycle. And so in my current job, it started to turn into that. You start seeing like the cycle. There's a lot of overspending, and there are just a lot of people disappearing and leaving, but I started to see a pattern, and then there were also people getting promotions. And I've worked at my current company for 8 years, and another coworker who's Indian has worked there for 12 years, and they hired all of these technologists. So it was like the 3 of us, there's another coworker of ours, and then now there are like 10 technologists. And they've given people, we had no titles. I was like a web developer for 8 years because they didn't believe in titles in my company. I work for a nonprofit. We'll keep the name redacted. And all of a sudden they've created senior titles and they didn't tell us. And you start feeling paranoid. You know, people are like, oh, things were so old school before we came. But before we came, we were a ragtag team and we didn't have a lot of money to implement things. So it's kind of like you're repairing a reliable, I guess, Buick. Is that one of the things? I don't drive that much, but like a nice Buick and Oldsmobile, and that you're always repairing to make it work. And we got an influx of money with the change in the political climate, which was great. But as soon as you have more money, all the vultures all of a sudden also descend because they're like, this is a money-making opportunity. And again, you start seeing the writing on the wall. And ordinarily, I would just say like, okay, it's coming, it doesn't feel good, and I'll just quit or leave. whenever they give me the package, you know, because there are all these senior people, but I've been here for 8 years, and somehow I don't deserve a senior title. And I decided to actually push back and actually ask. And this feels like I'm being a troublemaker at work, like I'm not following the program. I actually went to HR to ask about this, like, oh, hey guys, kind of think there's something wrong here. The people who've been here the longest are not getting promoted, don't have a senior title, and there's no explanation. There's no kind of like, oh, you guys were really bad at your job. I could see if I had a performance review. And normally, again, I would say all this in my head and just like write it out in my Dear Diary. But this time I actually said it out loud. And it was very emotional for me. I'm not like screaming and yelling because that's not in my nature, but I am trying to, logic this out in order to get a response from HR. And even though I did it through tears and I didn't feel powerful, it also opened me up to a lot of my coworkers because I'm like, I'm going to be transparent. I went to HR and everyone's like, you should go to HR. This is extremely unfair. So in the end of the day, taking that risk actually brought me closer to my coworkers. I would always eat lunch at my desk, but I would take different coworkers out to lunch and ask them if I was being paranoid. I went to HR like 2 or 3 times and I actually got a change. They actually agreed with me and said something suspicious is going on and we would like to help you out. So I think taking a career risk in the end can be worth it. At least it makes you feel like you're the captain of your fate. Yeah, thanks.